Welcome to Grace to Endure. In this video, we're going to be in the last few verses of Daniel chapter 9. We're going to slow them down and look very closely at the numbers. And I want to show you two views about how much time the Antichrist will rule and reign on the earth. One view is that he will reign for 7 years, and halfway at the midpoint, about 3.5 years in, he will stop playing like a nice guy and he'll turn into kind of like a tyrannical dictator. That view comes from here, Daniel chapter 9. And then there's another view, a second view, that says that the Antichrist only has 3.5 years in which he will reign, and that he would just be obviously evil the whole time. So I'm going to show you where those two views come from. And also, I want to encourage us, as I regularly do, that whenever we study biblical prophecy, we have to hold loosely our opinions, give room for prophetic foreshortening, so that God, as he unfolds it in real time, that we'll be able to recognize it, because we're not so dogmatic, but yet we are extremely familiar with the passages. Let's step back into Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, right at the beginning of that verse. And just for context, we want to see who is being addressed and what's being talked about here. Okay, so 70 weeks are declared about your people and your holy city. So, of course, the angel is talking to Daniel, and who are Daniel's people and what is his holy city. I think that because we have the presence of both of these phrases, we can narrow it down to the people of Israel and Jerusalem, because there's both of them. If it just said your people, I don't know that we could be completely dogmatic, because we could say, what does that mean? Just all believing people? Or are we just talking about the children of Israel? But because we have this added phrase, and your holy city, which is, I think, clearly Jerusalem, yeah, I definitely think that in the context, this particular section of Daniel is really talking about how God's going to intervene and deal with Jerusalem and Israel, okay? And it's going to start near Daniel's time and end at Jesus's coming, his second coming, okay? So all of these things are going to be a description of how God is going to use Israel, and even specifically Jerusalem, at that time. So it tells us kind of where some of this is going to take place is probably near or around Jerusalem, and it will heavily involve the people of Israel. Okay, so how many years is it going to take for all of these things to take place? Well, it's 490 years. And where do we get that? Well, it says right here 70 weeks. So if you take 70 and you multiply it by 7, because there's 7 days in every week, okay? So 70 sevens, okay? 70 times 7, you get 490 years. Now, in the rest of this video, we're going to see how two main views divide this up. Let's continue reading in Daniel chapter 9, verse 25, and then the beginning of 26. No one understand this, from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be rebuilt with a plaza and a moat, but in difficult times. After the 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off and will have nothing. So we see that first comes the 7 times 7. So where are we getting that? Of course, in every week there are 7 days. So that's where your first 7 is coming from. And then, of course, it says 7 weeks. So 7 of those, 7 sevens, is 49 years. So then it says 62 weeks, right? So then 7 times 62, you're going to get 434 years. And you add that up, you get 483. And then bring it over here to the right and subtract that from your original amount of years, 490, that we talked about in the previous slide, and you're going to have 7 years left. Now, if you want to add it up according to weeks, that's over here on the left, the 70 weeks minus 7 minus 62, 1 week left, okay? So whether you do it according to years, weeks, whichever one is easier for you, the point is both views agree that there's 7 weeks, 1 week, 7 years left for the rest of this passage to take place. And both views do agree that the anointed one is Christ coming at his first coming, and that he is the ruler that is then cut off and has nothing, because we have to wait for his kingdom to come on earth. So Jesus died, and he then rose and ascended into heaven, and we are all just on pause, right? We're waiting. It's like, okay, it would seem like, okay, now what? So that's where most views would agree, is that this is talking about Jesus Christ, the Messiah, and that he died on the cross. And then there's this pause here for Israel. Right? Let's take a look at what different views say about these last 7 years that we've seen that are left in this prophetic section of Daniel chapter 9. Let's read in verse 26. The people of the coming ruler will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come with a flood, and until the end there will be war. Desolations are decreed. Okay, so this view over here on the left is going to propose that Jesus fulfilled half of this already, and the Antichrist will fulfill the last 3.5 years. So they would say that this that's in yellow, the coming ruler, is still just talking about Jesus, the Messiah, because in the context we were just talking about the Messiah and how he was cut off. They would say that it's kind of like how you have, let's just imagine that the prophet Daniel is standing here and he's seeing mountain peaks of events without seeing the valley in the middle of how much time is in between each of these prophetic events. So he is seeing the Messiah cut off, the city destroyed, and the sanctuary being destroyed. No more sacrificial system. And so that the idea is that Jesus fulfilled the first thing. The Messiah was cut off when he died, and then he's rejected by Israel. And so then in 70 AD, the Romans came in and they destroyed the city and got rid of the sanctuary. So all of this happened quickly. So that would be the meaning of this part in blue, that it all happened quickly in time, or relatively quickly. Then in green, they would say that the war and the desolations that are decreed are for Jerusalem, and that until the end, until Armageddon, there's just going to be trouble for Jerusalem because of their rejection of the Messiah. Okay, now let's look over here on the right and let's see this view. This view would say that there are 7 years still left, and that the Antichrist is going to fulfill all 7 of those years. And so this view would say that this in yellow, the coming ruler, is the Antichrist. And this is where this idea of a revised Roman Empire, this is where this comes from. So they're kind of packing a lot into this verse, in these two verses, 26 and you'll see in 27. They pack a lot in there, and they are assuming a few things. So it's up for you to decide if you think that they're reading into the text or not. So, okay, they would say that the Antichrist is the coming ruler, and so that those that destroyed Jerusalem, the city and the sanctuary, in AD 70, okay, those people are the Romans. And so they would then jump to the conclusion that the Antichrist will be Roman, and that there will be a revised Roman Empire, and that the Antichrist will act very fast and very swiftly, and that he will be harsh in the last 7 years of his rulership. Let's finish up here in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, and then see what each of you believes. It's same as last time. The things on the side is where they disagree, and the thing in the middle is what they agree on. Okay, he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and offering, and the abomination of desolation will be on the wing of the temple until the decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator. Okay, so the view on the left that believes that there's only 3.5 years left of this last 7-year period of Daniel chapter 7. So they believe Jesus has already fulfilled 3.5 of these years. they would say that this that's in yellow, he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, is actually still referring to Jesus the Messiah. They would reference the Matthew 26 and Mark 14 when Jesus is setting up the covenant, and that he is the one who makes the firm covenant that he offered for 3.5 years to Israel. He's in Jerusalem. He was actually crucified in Jerusalem, right? And so the idea is that this whole passage is talking about Israel and Jerusalem. So this is God dealing with Israel, okay? And that Jesus came and he offered a firm covenant. And that then who's the one that actually then in pink put a stop to sacrifice and offering? This view would say Jesus did. That Jesus had the temple destroyed in AD 70 to put a stop to sacrifice and offering, because Jesus has already offered the one sacrifice necessary. And so God put a stop to it, and he is saying, no, you are not going to keep doing this. I will not accept this sacrifice any longer. And so God put a stop to it, and he instead is going to give them this that's in red, the Antichrist. And so this view would say that the Antichrist is the one being talked about that does the abomination of desolation. And this is the only section that they would say is talking about the Antichrist, this last part of the verse. He's the desolator, okay? And that Jesus will destroy him at his second coming. And so the judgment is on Israel. The last 3.5 years is actually God's judgment for the rejection of the Messiah. Okay, now let's look over here at the 7 years left view. And in this view, they would say that that's in yellow, he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, is actually talking about the Antichrist. And that this would be their evidence that the Antichrist has 7 years left. Now, this is their only evidence, because in other parts of Scripture, it always says 3.5. I'm going to show you that on the next slide. Okay, so then look in pink. In the middle of the week, he'll put a stop to sacrifice and offerings. They believe that the Antichrist is going to make a 7-year covenant and with Israel, and that everyone will know it, and that in the middle of that time, the Antichrist will break the covenant, and then he will do the abomination of desolation. They also believe, along with the other view, that then Jesus will destroy the Antichrist at his appearing. In conclusion, I want to wrap up this video by just giving you some verses to compare and contrast. First, I want you to see other passages that make it very clear the Antichrist definitely has at least a 3.5-year kingdom left. As to if there is another side to that, we'll find out as we watch it unfold, if we live during that time. And if not us, then the saints that will follow after us. We'll see it play out in real time. But it's good that we pass on this information and these passages to them with good notes and thoughts so that they can build upon it and learn more as the years go by and get closer to it happening. Also, I have here abomination of desolation passages for you to compare and contrast. I would always encourage to just be very familiar with the surrounding events of the abomination of desolation so that when it gets here, you will be able to recognize it.